allowing yourself to recognize the ending of something and to lay it to rest and give it and to be able to mourn it, be able to literally say, okay, I'm releasing this, I'm laying this down, I'm giving myself time to mourn, to grieve, to accept, and try to move forward. I would say respect. I was gonna say love, but sometimes love is not enough. And so like sometimes that is just not enough. I definitely think loyalty is definitely something that needs to be there, and safety, and whether that's just be like emotional safety. When we see someone maybe doing things they wouldn't normally do just to, see us smile or make us, feel better, or, just whatever the case is, like whatever it is that person is needing emotionally and saying, hey, this isn't my norm, but I'm willing to meet you where you are. That's a big, that's so meaningful and so powerful. It shows intention, it shows care. There's so much, because that's a lot of that's action, right? And sacrifice is an action. And so being able to see that is a big deal. That is a big deal.
We are continuing in our Life After Divorce series, which is really doing well. I'm excited. I thank you all for watching and subscribing and all the other good stuff. And we're just here to help people today. So, in part two, we're going to talk with our special guest, Tierra Faulkner. She's no stranger to the YouTube podcast. How are you doing, Tierra?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
For sure. Thanks again, once again, for taking some time out of your day to be a guest. I want to talk to you about life after divorce. I want to jump into this to respect your time. How did you and your ex meet?
We met in high school.
Hmm. High
Mhm.
school sweethearts.
Yeah, yeah. And our houses were like right across from each other. So we would be like at the bus stop together. But we didn't talk for like a year. And then like sophomore year, like 10th grade, we started talking, became friends.
Really? Hmm.
Mhm.
That's interesting. So over time, like, or when you start to date and then you start to get into like the courtship and going into uh getting married, what made you say this was the man for me?
Um, I really like we were best friends. And so like he knew everything about me and I knew everything about him. So it was very comfortable, and he was talking about marriage really early on. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is great. This is my person.
So I think that is important to have that friendship going into marriage. But sometimes I wonder with that, like if y'all are friends and say y'all are dating other people and say if you really like this person, how do you have that conversation when they like, yeah, I went on this date with this other person because we're like cool or whatever. But how do you get to the place where you like, no, but I really like you? Like, do you have that conversation or do you just kind of let the friendship evolve?
Um, I think it depends. I think it depends on the person and what they're wanting to express. Like, I mean, me personally, I'm all for let your feelings be known, express how you feel. Um, but also like considering like what you might value. Like I didn't want to be in a relationship with him initially, like because I was like, well, I don't want to ruin our friendship. So that was kind of something. But then after a while, I was like, maybe this could actually work out and be a thing. So, I really think it just depends on the person, and maybe you two can have that conversation, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just kind of see what happens with the friendship and let things kind of form organically. But I think it just depends.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I think I'm kind of selfish though.
Yeah. You're just like, let me just lay it all out there.
Yeah, I
Okay.
want you.
Yeah, yeah. I'm all for that.
So once the well, I'm assuming like there was this engagement time. Did you both do premarital counseling or no?
Yeah, we did. I think it was like
Mhm,
one session.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, it was kind of short from what I remember, but yeah.
Looking back, do you feel that premarital counseling is important for any couple that for most couples that desire to marry? You think it's necessary or
Um, I think I don't know if it's necessarily necessary, but it's can be very insightful. I think it can be really helpful to maybe just lay some things out or, you know, maybe gain some deeper insight, to really kind of be sure, this is the direction you want to go in. While having like someone there kind of being able to like facilitate or, have this like unbiased view of, you two's relationship before you jump into marriage. So it's, I don't know if it's necessarily necessary, but I think it can be a very helpful tool before going into marriage.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think in my first marriage, I think we had maybe about 2 sessions.
Hmm.
And after that, my pastor was like, y'all good. I trust y'all.
Hmm.
I mean, it lasted 15 years, but it is what it is.
Hmm.
At what point did you know that there was trouble in paradise?
Uh,
And whatever you feel comfortable with sharing.
I I think I knew, but I was in denial that like anything was wrong or things were off. I would just kind of like just kind of maybe turn a blind eye to some things that looking back are like, those are some red flags, or why didn't I pay more attention to this, or when he said this or that. Um, so it was probably like maybe 5 years in or so is when I was kind of like, okay, something's not right.
Mhm,
um, but yeah, it was kind of deeper in, but I think I knew, but I just didn't want to see that things weren't perfect.
mhm, mhm. And how many years were you married total?
7.
7. Okay. Okay. Yeah, because sometimes, most times, men don't initiate divorce because we always throw the numbers out there about 80% of women file for divorce and things of that nature. But I realized over time that a lot of times men, they would just stick it out. They would just stay the course. And I realized too that a lot of men struggle with finishing, with ending things. I know in the last 5 years of my marriage, I knew my marriage was over, but I was still there. Like I didn't know how to end it.
Mm,
So,
mhm,
um, but that's a whole another show because somebody was asking me about that.
mm.
Um, Looking back, what could have you had done to keep your marriage, or
Uh,
what you could have done differently?
yeah, the it's just kind of funny because I was gonna actually talk to him the other day about some of this stuff, but I wish I kind of just gave him this more space to deal with whatever he was dealing with his stuff. Instead of maybe looking at like a timeline for certain things. But
Mhm,
it just I think I just kind of should have I wish I kind of just gave him a little bit more of that, and kind of really tried to understand our different like communication styles a little bit.
mhm,
So I'm more of a like, well, I want to talk about it right now and like process things right now. And like he was more of a person that kind of needed some space or needed some time to process things or and then come back to it. But I kind of wish I just done things a little bit differently. But I think ultimately, I think I came to the conclusion that there was nothing I really could have done to really kind of repair the breakdown of it, of the
Mhm,
whole, relationship.
mhm,
Um, and that I couldn't change a person. And that was something that I wish I had maybe kind of accepted earlier, is that I did not have the power to change someone. And when someone shows you who they are, just believe them, accept it, and you do whatever you're going to do with that. But, just kind of accepting that I couldn't, well, maybe I could see better, for him and some of the decisions he was making,
mhm,
that maybe he couldn't see it, and I can't give somebody new eyes, right? I can't change how you see yourself in the mirror. I don't have that power. And so I wish I kind of um accepted that fact a little bit
mhm.
like sooner on, and just kind of let things just kind of just let things kind of fall apart, I guess, instead of trying so hard to keep it together.
Mhm, mhm. How do you feel about accepting people for who they are? Because I was talking to a friend about this, and I think it's probably one of the hardest things. But do you feel like that was maybe something that you learned, like just giving people space to be who they are?
Hmm. Yeah.
And and if that's the case, do you think that the marriage maybe would have survived longer, like accepting him for who he is?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it would have lasted a couple more years.
Mhm,
I don't know, but I know that in accepting who he was and the choices that he was making,
mhm,
I would have neglected myself in some way. Right.
mhm,
Um, it wouldn't have been the healthiest thing for me to watch and to kind of witness, like, and experience the pain that I think would have came from just being like, okay, yeah, yeah, like I'll just stick this out, or I'll just kind of like let you do your thing, or let you figure some things out. Um, and I was like, I think the way that maybe we needed to grow was apart. I like had to be kind of separate, and I was it's like 'cause I was talking about this the other day. Like we're cool. Like there's no bad blood between us, and it's still very much a lot of love there. Like love for each other.
for
I'm
sure.
not like romantic love
Yeah.
on my I keep for myself. Um, but just kind of me kind of recognizing that like the things that he needed to grow through was maybe something that had to be apart from me, and me just accepting that um sometimes people can't come with you
Mhm,
um on the trajectory of where your life was going. I felt like our trajectories were going in very different directions, and it was like me being like, no, no, I want you to come up with me, but it's like somebody's not, they're not meeting you on that, they're not seeing it, they're not seeing themselves. It's like, I think sometimes it's like divine intervention kind of has to come into plays, and things just kind of have to be apart. And I think it's better for both of us, I think, just for us to be able to grow apart
mhm,
and, be kind of separate. So,
mhm. So do you believe in, because a lot of times people talk about we grew apart.
mhm.
You are a believer in that.
I never really was, because I kind of, when I used to hear that, I'd be like, well, that's not really a reason to like end a marriage, because I just kind of be like, what does that even mean? Um, but now when I think about like the idea of like growing apart, it's like something something somewhere was probably neglected in some area of that relationship or that marriage, because if you're allowing yourselves to grow apart in marriage, some need somewhere is not getting met, or some communication, some conversation is not being had. Maybe somebody is growing or maybe outgrowing the relationship, and someone is staying stagnant or staying the same, or not working on themselves or whatever the case is. And that can cause, some rifts, because we are always changing. Like as people, as individuals, we are always evolving into new people. That doesn't ever change,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm not the same person I was when I was 16 or 21 or 25. I'm not the same person I was last year, last month, right? Like we're always evolving and changing. And so I think the idea of growing apart to me still is kind of like, well, what were you growing into?
Mm.
What were you growing towards? And like, where was this one person going and this other person was going? And why couldn't you meet each other in the middle somewhere? Um, those are things that kind of come up for me, but I think just growing apart, like, oh, we just don't really mesh anymore. I'm like, well, I don't know, but that's me. I have hope for love and reconciliation and like all these things. So like to me, I'm like, come on now, it can't be that. Like if that's it, then I'm like, well, can we talk about it? Can we work through it? I mean,
Mhm.
can we also accept that and know that people do change over time?
Yes.
But, why did you choose this person in the first place? You must have saw something that said, I'm willing to grow with you and be with you for years and forever. So like
Mhm.
what was that? But I digress.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and there's two things I want to extract from that because you said some powerful things. One of them was I heard someone say when men get married, they expect the woman to stay the same. The woman is in hopes of that he would change.
Mm,
So you're kind of like missing each other or
yeah.
these unsaid expectations.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then there was something else that you said that I think was really powerful. You talked about if you grew apart, where was there any direction that y'all were supposed to be going in the first place? So I thought that was good. So do you think that, are you saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, so what I'm hearing is there's not a vision for the home. That's what I'm getting from it.
Where is that piece of unity, right? Because we can grow as individuals. We're always going to do that. But
Mm,
there's also got to be like, okay, how are we intentionally growing together? And how are we intentionally keeping this home unified? Um, there's there's that missing piece. And that kind of comes back to, okay, if we're growing apart, where there's that missing communication, that missing maybe emotional need or whatever it is that's not aligned for you to recognize that or to see that or to see that something's missing, and then it just kind of continues and continues and continues until there's a complete breakdown. So yeah, that's like not really being intentional about where that middle space can go in and actually trying to just have those conversations, talk about expectations, talk about those things.
mhm, mhm. That is so good. That's good. So what are some things that a married couple could do to grow together in your mind? What do you think are some things?
I think understanding each other's communication styles,
Mhm,
understanding each other's operate, how you process things, um, and like trying to meet in the middle, right? Because everybody is different. So like your partner may have different emotional needs than you. They might have different ways how they process an argument, how they communicate, how they express love. All of these things like they might be different. And then you have these like unsaid expectations about things, and you're expecting your partner to just automatically know and or be the same as you. And it's like, well, actually, that's most likely not the case. So being intentional about understanding those differences and seeing where you can meet each other in the middle. Like if you have an emotional need, like let's say for example, a wife wants to have like long talks at the end of the day or something, or just want to conversate,
mhm,
and the husband maybe he likes to be like, well, hold hands or just kind of be like caressed or things like that, or just held or whatever,
mhm,
physical touch. and maybe he's not good with words. And so having those long conversations might be a little bit difficult for him. Maybe she's like, I'm not really a touchy person, really. But so maybe that those aren't things that they're automatically going to lean into without having a conversation, without trying to meet each other in the middle to get those emotional needs met. And so that's really important to understand how your partner operates, how your partner communicates, how they want to receive love, and then how you can both meet each other's needs in the middle.
Mm, yeah. Because I think to the breakdown of a marriage happens too is when one person is giving too much. They're trying to always meet that person on their side of the field when, like you said, they should be meeting in the middle. Um, I heard a quote that said, compromise is dividing the cake in such a way that everybody believes they have the biggest piece.
Mm,
So
that's
we have
good.
to be willing to compromise and meet each other halfway. But a lot of times we
Mhm,
kind of acquiesce to what that person want, and we lose ourselves in the process.
mhm. Yep.
So,
Yep. That happens a lot. That happens a lot. People kind of over extending, giving out, not being poured back into. That can definitely lead to breakdown for sure.
mhm. But what did you do to heal from your divorce?
A lot of therapy for myself, and you know, I'm a firm believer that every therapist should have a therapist. Lots of therapy, lots of journaling and reflecting, talking to my other friends who had experienced a divorce, knowing that I wasn't alone. I had also went to some divorce care groups at church. Um, those were really helpful for me. It was really good to be in a space where other people had been experiencing the same thing, um, and being able to have some tools and being able to have God in that space was really helpful for me.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, a lot of tears, a lot of crying, just allowing myself to feel, allowing myself to grieve. I think that was like the biggest thing for me is just being able to accept the grief process um that came with divorce. And it's like, a lot of times divorce feels like a death. For me, it literally felt like, before everything was like finalized and all of these things, it was kind of rough because we were living in the same place,
Mhm.
and it was just I was there still kind of like praying and hoping that maybe something would change. I think
Mhm.
the outcome would be different. But for me, it felt like a ripping of my soul. I could feel it in the spirit. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what it feels like when like half of you just it was the worst pain I think I've really ever experienced. And so, but allowing myself to grieve the relationship, the friendship, the way I thought my life would have been. Because I thought like, oh no, still be married at this age and have kids or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
So grieving where I thought I would be, what my life would have was supposed to look like, all of these things. Um, and allowing the time to do that and the time to actually acknowledge it for what it was, because I was with my ex for altogether it was almost 15 years. It was like 12, 13 years, something like that. So, and we were young, like we were super young, grew up together, like had all these life transitions happening at the same time. So for me to allow myself to say, hell, this was a long time. It's gonna take a minute for me to probably be like, oh yeah, no, I'm all good. Like allowing yourself to recognize the ending of something and to lay it to rest and give it and to be able to mourn it, be able to literally say, okay, I'm releasing this, I'm laying this down, I'm giving myself time to mourn, to grieve, to accept, and to try to move forward.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about like the tearing of your soul. I remember going through my divorce, and I remember the very same thing, but we were at church
Mhm.
and the pastor was praying for us. It was during service, and he said, I feel like there's been a tear in this relationship. And when he said that, like I felt like the inside of me just fell out of me. Like I was just this shell standing there,
Mm.
so yeah, I remember that feeling, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's really over."
Mhm.
So yeah, I get it. I identify. What three ingredients every marriage need to be successful?
Mm. Three ingredients. I would say respect. Um, I I was gonna say love, but sometimes love is not enough. And so like sometimes that is just not enough. I definitely think loyalty is definitely something that needs to be there, and safety. And whether that's just be like emotional safety.
Mm,
And that kind of like safety slash like vulnerability too.
mm,
I think we need to be able to have the space to be vulnerable, and we also need to be vulnerable, um, because that allows for communication to be had. It allows for other things to kind of work itself out in a way, because once you've laid it out, there's room to say, okay, I'm willing to work through whatever this is, and I'm also willing to express whatever it is. And that says there's a willingness to make this work, to see it through. So yeah, that's what I would say.
mm, mm. How do you feel about, because you talked about respect?
Mhm.
Can, because I hear a lot of times I lost respect for him or her in a marriage. How do you feel like respect can ever be regained, or do you feel like when it's gone, it's just gone?
I think it can be regained. I think it depends on what broke it in the first place, or what, you know, what made this person be like, yeah, no, I just don't respect this person as a woman, as a man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's got their thresholds on what that is.
Got you.
Um, but I think someone has to be kind of willing to show maybe change or something, and someone has to be willing to receive that for it to be repaired, for respect to be gained back, because that's a big one. To for someone to have lost respect, and to stop seeing you a certain way. That's a big one, but it kind of comes back to the willingness. It's like, okay, I'm willing to show you that I've maybe worked on this or changed whatever it was that broke it. I'm also willing to hear you out. I'm also willing um to try to repair this or whatever this was. So it's got to be a willingness on both sides ultimately to
Mhm.
try to repair and reconcile that.
Mm. Yeah, that's real. I heard I heard a pastor the other day, and he was reading from the book of Colossians, and he talked about there's a scripture where it talks about make allowance for each other's faults.
Mm.
And I've read that scripture 10 million times, but the way he broke it down was like, do you have any capacity in you to allow for people to be human?
Mm.
And I was like I was stuck. Because again, I read the scripture 1,000 times, but a lot of times I think as humans, as people, we're so filled to capacity with stress, bills, worry, doubt, fears, and hope. And so I'm like, do I have capacity to allow my spouse to be human? Now, that's not saying that because, a lot of times people like to take extremes. I know whoever's watching this or whoever's listening, they like, but what if they did this? And what if they threw me out a 15-story window? I'm not talking about that. Okay. But just allowing for them to be human, because just like you're human just like I am. And do they even have that capacity? So I think that might even be a great question to ask like while dating someone.
Yeah, yeah, that made me think about grace and how much grace we're willing to give to somebody in their humanness, and to accept that our partner is going to be flawed, it's going to make mistakes, um, but do we have enough grace to extend that to them, um, when they do? So that's a big one. It reminded me of when me and Mike, we were in the church and everything, and like one of my pastors was like, you have to, your husband is like your brother in Christ too. And I was like, yeah, like that made a lot of sense to me because viewing them that way, it was like, oh, like you still deserve the same grace and mercy as I do. Um, and so that kind of it is able to kind of where helps when we are able to kind of be able to extend grace and extend, forgiveness, um, and being able to see each other as like as just human to human, as just dust, really. Because I know a lot of times in relationships, we might put our spouses on a pedestal. We might look at them as like, oh my gosh, the person who could do no wrong. And then when they do, it's like, wait a minute, oh no. Instead of looking at them as, not necessarily something to idolize. Because I do see that a lot. People idolizing marriage, idolizing the idea of a spouse or a spouse, um, to where they are that sitting on the throne of your heart, um, versus Christ. And when things start to fall apart, it kind of shows maybe what you have been placing at the throne of your heart. But when we see people for who they are, as just as dust, as human, as flawed, um, it allows room for us to maybe not idolize that person or what they represent in our lives, but to be able to meet them where they are, be able to see them for who they are, and be able to give ourselves space and room to lean on something else when maybe we have given all to this person and lean on them for everything. Being able to shift that when we begin to see them as just another flawed human being.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. That's a reel. I think I'm gonna post that. That's a Instagram reel because you was preaching. That's real. I'm just saying, like,
It comes out.
but and I was thinking as I did a reel on this grace thing because there's a book called Grace Filled Marriage, which I think you might really enjoy, where he talks about how much grace God extends to us, and sending a son to die for us and those kind of things. And I did a reel where we talked about people sitting on the throne, or I won't say sitting on the throne because Jesus is supposed to be on the throne, right? But I talked about a reel that said I used a little nursery rhyme where it said Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty, had a great fall, right? And I was just thinking, like, that's the way we kind of do marriage, right? Like they have this great fall and we can't put them together again. Like whenever they show their humanity, we just like, oh my God, I can't believe you've done this. It's almost as if we can't put them back together again. And it's one of those things where if we looked at them as human, when they do make mistakes, we can extend that grace. But I think a lot of times we struggle with that. Um, I tell people God didn't create marriage to be more fulfilling than him,
Mm.
you know, because I do see a lot of times people idolize marriage. Like I'm married and, but there's a certain amount of grace that you got to have when you're married.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that was good. That was good. Yeah, not letting marriage fulfill you more than him. Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Because if that's the case, why would we need God then? If marriage was the apex of relationships, why are there so many trials and tribulations that come with it?
Mhm, mhm, exactly, exactly, exactly.
you know. Um, what advice would you give to singles who desire to marry?
My advice is to know yourself first, um, and get to know who you are if you haven't already, and also get an idea of what your standards are for a partner, what your deal breakers are, what are your non-negotiables, like what are your values, right? And that that will help narrow down and kind of get you to where you're trying to go. Because when we understand our values and our core identity, it helps us be able to pick a partner who shares the same values, right? Like if I value faith and stability and knowledge, or whatever that is that I value, a partner that doesn't value faith or learning or any of the things that I value, then we're probably not gonna be a fit. You're probably not gonna meet the needs that I have. You're probably not going to understand when I'm going through certain things, or like when I'm praying, you might not get it if you don't value faith, or that's not a part of your life. So getting to know, like, what are your top 10 values? Like, what are things that are just like, this is the core of who I am. These are my unshakable things about me. And so when I'm meeting people, friendships, relationships, whatever the case is, if they don't value the same things, I know I can skip that, go on to the next thing, um, and just see how much better that feels to be with someone who more aligns with who you are, um, versus maybe some of the more surface level outward things that maybe somebody might look at, like, that don't really matter in the long term. Because we want to think we're thinking about longevity. You want marriage, so you're saying you want something long term. You want something that's that's standing for a long time, forever. So you want someone who's going to match your values, at least share a majority of the values that you have. Um, and but to understand that, you have to know yourself. You have to get to know who you are as an individual, um, and to do your own healing work, instead of maybe looking for a partner to quote unquote fix you. Um, and looking to them to heal certain parts of you. While I do think relational healing is important, I do think sometimes we need that, but that can't be the sole thing that gets you there. Like you have to get to a solidness within yourself, a knowing of who you are. Not to say you have to be totally healed or arrived, because I don't think we ever get there.
No.
Um, but you got to have a solid understanding of who you are, and you have to not necessarily depend totally on another person, um, to make you feel better, to make you love yourself, or to make you feel like you're now worthy because now you've been picked,
Mm,
right? Like why, and understanding, why do you want marriage? What is it about it, that makes you want it in the first place? So I think kind of being able to ask yourself those questions, reflect on that, um, but getting solid on who you are, your intention for marriage, and being able to know your deal breakers and your standards. I think once you've got that all figured out, I think you should be good. I think you
yeah.
should be all right.
I like that. And I know this is not a popular question, but I like that you said why. Like, why do you want to get married? And that can tell you a lot right there. Because some people be like, I just don't want to be lonely. And it's like, you can be married and lonely,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
So
you absolutely can.
you got to come up with a better answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep. You really got to sit with that why. You really have to
Mhm.
sit with it.
Mhm. I heard a pastor once say that when he counsel couples, he said, "Why do you want to get married?" If they say everything based on like, "I need, I want," he's like, "That's a bad indicator
Mm-hmm.
because now you're making that person your everything, right?" We just had the conversation about putting your marriage above, God and stuff like that. So I think that's a great question. I might leave that in the comment section below. Why do you want to get married? think that's
Mhm.
the
Yeah, yeah,
one.
and that was a good point too about the whole I want, marriage is about sacrifice too.
Yeah,
So if you're not ready to make some sacrifice, be willing to sacrifice for the sake of your marriage and for the other person, that's another thing. Because sacrifice is it's probably it's in there with things to kind of make a marriage work. Really, as sacrifice. Because if you're saying, okay, I'm tied to this person for the rest of my life, it's not always going to be all about me, right? And to say, okay, what does this person need? How can I show up better for this person? How can I love this person? All of these things require some sort of sacrifice of self, somewhere. And so being able to say, yeah, I'm willing to do that for my partner. I'm willing to sacrifice, and I want to be sacrificed for. Um, that's a big one. That's a big one too.
that is so good. Yeah, because outside of like God, I think one ingredient I'm always looking for if I'm coaching somebody, I'm looking for somebody that's like I'm willing to serve. And I know that's a word we really don't use. I know it's like kind of like outdated or whatever. But if you're not willing to serve, then it's gonna be tough.
Mhm.
Because if you have a like a servant's heart and you're willing to look out for that person, like you said too, and to be sacrificed for. I like that you said that, because we both have to look out for each other. But to be able to serve one another over time, like trying to outserve each other, I think that's a beautiful thing because I'm always trying to make sure that you're good and vice versa. And that's how you keep those wheels turning. That's how you keep the well-oiled machine running.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly, exactly, and that's so meaningful. When we see someone, maybe doing things they wouldn't normally do just to, see us smile or make us, feel better, or just whatever the case is, like whatever it is that person is needing emotionally, and saying, "Hey, this isn't my norm, but I'm willing to meet you where you are." Um, that's a big. That's so meaningful and so powerful. It shows intention, it shows care. There's so much, because that's a lot of that's action, right? And sacrifice is an action. And so being able to see that is a big deal. That is a big deal.
Yeah. Last question,
Mhm.
and you can answer it if you want to. You don't have to, but is Tiara open to remarriage?
Yes, I definitely am. Like I said, I believe in love. Okay. Yes, yes, I am so open for remarriage. I think marriage is a beautiful thing. And even though things did not work out how I ideally envisioned it with my ex, it didn't leave like a bad taste in my mouth about marriage, because that's one experience. It doesn't, I can't, there's no room to generalize marriage or experiences, because that's just one thing. And I refuse to let one experience paint a whole picture of something that is really meant to be beautiful and um just a great thing. Like, yes, I believe it.
That's
Mhm.
what's up. I love it. I know I said this was my last question, but I think I got one more.
Mhm.
Okay, one more question. Um, one more question, and I forgot the question that fast, and it was a great question too. Oh, here it is. I found it. Who do you think makes a better spouse? Someone who's never been married or someone who's going into a remarriage? There's no wrong answer. I just wanted to see what's going on in Tiara's world.
Because someone who's already been married before, like, they kind of already know, they got some sort of insight into how marriage is and what it means. But because they've gotten to that point with someone before. But if you didn't learn anything from that first experience, oh no. And someone who's never been married before, they might have this thing in them that's like, "You know what? I'm ready. I have so much to give. I have all of this," like, and be a great partner, and be willing to learn and be willing to grow. And I think that's really all it is. It's just willing to grow, willing to learn, willing to sacrifice, um, and then you end up being a great partner for somebody. So, it can
Mm.
go either way, really.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. No right or wrong answer. I just kind of want to see what you thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much for taking some time out to uh, take this journey once again to be able to share with the world your experience. I just believe that this series is going to help somebody because you just never know what people are going through. And maybe this video can be a help to someone. So, Tiara, let everyone know how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Therapy with Tia. Also on LinkedIn as Tiara Faulkner. So yeah, like, send me a DM. Yeah, that's how you can reach me.
For sure. And you can also listen to our previous episode we recorded together on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you get your podcast platform. So you can catch us on there. Well, this has been a great episode. Thank you so much, Tiara. Well, you heard it here, Brave Hearts community. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and share this with a friend because someone might be going through a divorce. They might be contemplating, in this video can possibly, or podcast, help them maybe think different. Who knows? If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave a rating and review. Would love to hear from you. We recently gave away a free Amazon gift card, so we're doing that again. So go ahead and leave those ratings and reviews, and it'll put you in the drawing for one. So this is Sean Heineman with special guest Tiara Faulkner. Yes. All right, Brave Arts community, take care. Hey, thanks again for watching another segment of It's Scary to Remarry. I have so much more amazing content and some phenomenal guests as well. People who've been through a divorce, people who remarried, people who desire to marry. So much great content. So make sure that you hit one of these videos. It's somewhere around here. But anyway, go watch another video.